All right. Good morning, y'all. And happy Monday. I feel like people judge other people for saying happy Monday, but it's a thing that I say most Mondays to all my office mates, which is literally just my dog back there in that crate. Anyway, figured a good way to start the week would be with an episode of Robert's Mailbox. This is officially episode number 2. If this is your first time watching the show, here's the deal. Basically, this is my email inbox. This is my primary email inbox, but it's an email inbox I've set up for this purpose. So it's kind of like a swipe file of sorts with different e-commerce companies, marketing companies, really just any sort of company that I'm interested in their marketing and want to follow what they're doing. So I subscribe for their email lists, and really what we do on these episodes of Robert's Mailbox is dive into my inbox and pick out an email that looks interesting and break it down right there on the spot. So yeah, that's pretty much the premise, and that's what we are going to get into this morning. So without further ado, let's make some moves. So when we're looking at subject lines, really what I look for are 2/3 things. So I look for curiosity, benefit, or a combination of curiosity and benefit. So generally, those are the things that are going to make me want to open an email. And if an email has, one of those things or both of those things, it generally shoots kind of higher on somebody's priority list, right? So let's see kind of what we have going on here. So this is the email I reviewed last time from Ramit Sethi. If you haven't seen that, that's on episode number 1. And I think what I can do, I think YouTube lets you do what's called a card, where you can link to previous videos or something like that. I don't know. I'm obviously a newbie to this, so I'm going to try to link to that video if I can. And you can check that out too if you haven't seen it yet. So anyway, let's see what we have going on here. So I'm just going to kind of start from this point and go up. So talking big wins, set your clocks forward, sign on Zoom, okay. Let's see. So this one from Todd Brown looks pretty interesting, and so does this one from Jeff Walker. Let's pop over here to promotions and see what we have going on. Nice to meet you. Okay, this is interesting just because it's a benefit. And there's curiosity here too. I don't know what alpha GPC is, but I know that I want to enhance cognitive function. I would maybe simplify that a little bit, but maybe on its audience is fairly smart and they know what cognitive function means. I think most people do, but generally I try to keep things as simple as possible. Anyway, let's see what else we got going on. Super. Okay, that's interesting. Greatest hoodie ever made. Okay. So okay, hang on a minute. This actually looks interesting. Let's check this out. Okay. I mean, decent, but short. Not really helpful for us to break down right here. Okay, let's pop over to here and let's see what this Jeff Walker email looks like. What happened to me in Telluride? I spent last week with my family skiing in Telluride. As I was watching my dog get slide on, I thought of all those days we spent on the same mountain when they were little ones. Really short. Okay. Let's see what Todd Brown's got going on. Okay, cool. I think we can break this one down. So, someone sent me an $800,000 text message. True story. So, I was reading .com secrets. like I think that's one of the first books that Russell Brunson put out about marketing. It might be his second book, but anyway, it's pretty good so far. It's like kind of starts from a very foundational level and walks you through really building an online business and how you do that. But one of the things I was reading about this morning was what he calls, I forget the exact phrase that he said. Okay, yeah, he calls it an Enquirer Interrupt. And that's basically, he's talking about ads. So basically, like if you've ever looked at the National Enquirer, when you've been, standing in the checkout line of the grocery store, you've seen their headlines and they are absolutely ridiculous, but they're also absolutely interesting. Like each time you see one of those or you read one, you're like, hang on a second, what is this? And that's kind of the point, right? It piques your curiosity and it gets you like out of this drone state, right? Of just kind of like going through your life. It's something that kind of like really gets up in your face and is like, hey, pay attention to me, right? So this is kind of like a version of that, right? Like an $800,000 text message is generally something that's going to like pull you out of your general like trance state and say like, whoa, hang on a second, what is this thing? And then you immediately probably have this reaction of like, okay, that sounds unbelievable. So he counters that objection pretty immediately with with this phrase in parentheses, true story, right? So this is really hitting mainly on curiosity, right? But it's hitting on that pretty heavily because the concept of an $800,000 text message is specific and also it's very unique and there's a lot of credibility built in. So like we saw that with Ramit's email last time. So maybe I'm just drawn to money email subject lines. But anyway, like Ramit talks about a $500,000 Instagram strategy. This is an $800,000 text message. I don't know, maybe that's a trend in the online marketing space right now is how much money can you tie to some like typical, something unexpected, right? So anyway, it hits on that credibility, it piques your curiosity pretty heavily, and also it immediately addresses your objection of like, okay, well, there's no way that's true. It's like, yeah, well, actually it is true. So check this out. This is a text message also. I like this. This is very subtle, but it's a really like kind of like basic way to grab somebody's attention or to pull them in. And you'll see this sometimes with some Agora sales letters. If you ever pay attention to any of the stuff they do, a lot of times they will start a promo with a picture of something. And the first line will be like, look at this picture, right? And it seems very simple, but it's a really easy way to kind of like pull your reader in and just kind of get them to pay attention to the thing that you want them to pay attention to, right? So, and it's really easy to do that with a picture because people like looking at pictures. It piques your curiosity. It makes you kind of like, it feels a little bit more real and raw, like especially when you're talking about a picture of Todd Brown's text messages, right? So check this out. This is a text message I got from a student of mine after we spent just one day together. Yes, one day. Again, like immediately addressing your objections and also adding some voice to it as well. So $800,000 in less than one day. First 20 hours of cart open, 800K, smiley face. Been watching, well done. Proud of you, man. Thanks, bro. Tons of people started reaching out throughout wanting to promote, saying it's the best content they've seen on the topic. So my guess is that this is a sales email for an online product that Todd is selling, right? And my other guess is that we are probably somewhere towards the end of that. Could be wrong, but that's my prediction, right? Because normally it's towards, at least in my experience with launches, towards the end of the launch that you are throwing in a bunch of credibility, right? So like people who are familiar with you and who are familiar with the offer and who are like kind of bought in immediately aren't going to need as much convincing, and they're not going to need as much like credibility and social proof in order to buy. But for those people who are still on the fence, 3, 4, 5 days in, that's when you can start throwing in a ton of credibility, right? Because at that point, they're probably thinking, oh, this offer sounds really interesting, but I'm not sure that it would work for me, or I'm not sure the timing is right. So when you can throw in some like raw credibility like this, it kind of makes people put themselves in the shoes of this person, right? Like, oh, if they could do it, then maybe I could. So this gets even crazier. This is a really good segue because you kind of have to keep reading after this, right? Because this is not the first time my students have blown up my phone with these type of results. Boom. So good. Another thing, going back to Kyle Milligan, I mentioned him in the first video, but he has this system that's called like new, easy, safe, and big, right? And it's kind of like how he breaks down sales letters. But I think it basically the idea is like if you can show someone that an offer or an opportunity is new, that it's easy, that it's safe, and that it's big, then you're going to increase the odds that they will buy. Ooh, excuse me. That was good. Those were productive sneezes. Anyway, something that goes along with that, he basically has, so like with safe, he also includes the concept of predictable. So if you can convince someone that something is predictable, then they're also going to be more likely to buy. So in this situation, Todd is showing you that like, hey, my coaching, the success of my students is predictable. Not only did it happen with this one person, it's happened in the past as well. So here's another for 42,000. Yeah, man, the webinar we created down in Florida just did 42K to only 232 registrants on the last webinar we did too. Just raised the price to $12.97. And another for 300K. Hi, Todd. This month will be my first 300K month for Vital Sleep. Wow, that's amazing. Great job. Been quite the journey for you. Well done. So, like, the thing that I really like about these, and you'll see a lot of people doing this sort of, like, credibility these days, or this sort of social proof, is, like, these Facebook messages or text messages or whatever, is, like, it feels very raw, and it's got that sensation of, like, being able to peek behind the veil, right? And for whatever reason, like, people are really into that. People are really driven by curiosity and giving people the opportunity to see kind of like inside your life, especially if you're Todd Brown. Like if you're a big marketer and you're very successful, showing people these intimate conversations that you're having with your customers or with your students can be very powerful. And this one was for a whopping $3.5 million. Tim Donovan, an extra $3.5 million in just 8 months. Least I can do. Our day together led to $3.5 million in commission since. Love hearing that. Let's see if we can add another $3.5 million for you after next week. Excuse me. I have no doubt we will. So, again, like what's cool here, and this is another thing that Kyle Milligan talks about. He talks about when you're like adding proof to a sales argument that like, well, and actually, I think other people talk about this as well. Anyway, the point is like you start with something impressive, right? Like $800,000 in less than a day is crazy. Like that's going to grab your attention pretty quickly, right? Then you have 42,000, then you have 300,000, but then you end on a really high note. You end on something that is just like out of this world, right? And that's what this $3.5 million Facebook message is about, right? So that's pretty interesting. What do these folks have in common? The crazy thing is not much. They're all in different markets with different experience levels. Again, addressing objections, right? Like if you are a reader, maybe at this point you're thinking like, okay, well, all this sounds interesting, but I don't know if it would work in my market. Well, all these people are in different markets with different experience levels. The one thing they do have in common is I spent one day working directly with them. Question, what do you think would happen to your sales if you, instead of one day I spent to your sales if you, instead of, I feel like that could be worded a little differently. Anyway, instead of one day I spent 6 full weeks working together with you. Well, that's what I would like to do for you if you qualify. Okay, a lot going on here. So, first, like, he's kind of positioning this as like the thing that makes the difference. This is like the mechanism, right? Is Todd coming into your business and working with you for one full day. And then he does this kind of future pacing, promising without promising thing, right? He's saying, look, all these things, like these great things happen to these people, and I only spent one day with them, right? But can you imagine what would happen if I spent 6 full weeks with your business, 42 days, right? Like that's pretty wild. So he's not explicitly promising anything here, right? And that's what's kind of cool about this is like this is kind of a smart copy trick. He's not saying like, look, I made this guy 3.5 million in one day, so if I work with you for 42 days, then we can make 42 million or whatever, right? Or 120 million, whatever that math works out to. He's having you create that future for yourself, right? Which makes it a lot more powerful. And I forget where I heard this, but I think within the past month I've kind of heard this concept of basically like instead of where did I hear that? Oh, I think I heard it in a copy chief training with Ross O'Loughlin. But anyway, the point is that like it's one thing to make a big promise to somebody, right? It's one thing to say, look, I can help you make $3.5 million. The problem with that is that often sets off people's like BS meter. They hear that and they're like, yeah, okay, you couldn't though, right? But when you add in a bunch of social proof, when you show people instead of telling them, when you show them that you've done this before, and when you essentially lead them to the conclusion instead of making that promise yourself, it's a lot more powerful. So here, he's not saying, I can help you make zillions of dollars. He's saying, what do you think would happen if we spent 6 full weeks together? And you are arriving at that conclusion on your own of, oh, well, if these people made a lot of money, I could probably make a lot of money too, right? And it's a lot more powerful when you come to that conclusion on your own versus someone else kind of forcing you into that conclusion, if that makes sense. Well, that's what I'd like to do for you if you qualify, right? Selling from a place of power, kind of making this an exclusive thing, which if you're his target client, probably makes you want it a little bit more because I'm guessing this is not cheap. Next step, hop on this free strategy call. Great. Low barrier to entry. I'm guessing then that it probably is a high ticket thing and that he's selling people on the phone just because depending on the price point, like it's probably pretty hard to sell someone on a $10,000 product on just a sales page, right? Like I'm sure it's been done. I think Brian Kurtz, like the Titans Mastermind recordings he has, I think those are 5K. I think Gary Bencivenga has like a sales page for a product that's 5K. But like in general, I would say once you get up into the really high price points, it's probably smarter to sell people over the phone. But anyway, probably easier, I would imagine as well. So we'll start to map out a plan for you. And if you're a good fit, again, exclusivity, a little bit of, I don't know that that's scarcity, but the exclusivity kind of makes you want it a little bit more. We can even talk about me getting to work directly for you like I did for some of my students above. Best, Todd. Cool. So yeah, this is a really interesting, like pretty solid email. So here are some takeaways. The curiosity is huge in this one, right? Really something like the unique concept in this, the big idea kind of is this $800,000 text message. Ideally, you probably haven't seen someone talk about the concept of an $800,000 text message before, so it piques your curiosity, it makes you pay attention. Another thing is immediately addressing objections, right? So like if your BS meter goes off, he's immediately addressing like, yes, this is true. Really straightforward opener combined with the picture, like, hey, check this out. Look at this thing. Simple way to grab somebody's attention, pull them in pretty immediately. With the proof, starting with something very impressive, continuing to add proof, and then ending on like the highest note possible, right? Then addressing objections pretty clearly, highlighting a mechanism, and then instead of making a really big promise, leading someone to the conclusion that you want them to arrive at. That's really powerful. And then just the exclusivity with the offer and the really like low barrier to entry as far as like a call to action, right? A free strategy call. So, and I guess for some people, hopping on the phone is kind of intimidating, but I would imagine that for Todd's target client with this offer, they probably recognize the value of this and are chomping at the bit to get on the phone with him for free. Or somebody on his team or whatever. They just want to be in his world a little bit more. So, yeah, that is Robert's Mailbox episode number 2. Hope you found it helpful. Comment below if you have any questions or comments or whatever. And until next time, talk to you later.